Hey there, I'm Steve Loflin, and welcome to ScholarScoop. Today's guest is someone whose story I think you'll find incredibly powerful. Garrett Mintz is the founder and CEO of Ambition in Motion. When I think about conversations that can really make a difference for students, young professionals, or honestly anyone thinking about their path in life, Garrett has been at the very top of my list. His college journey wasn't straightforward. It was filled with challenges, setbacks, and tough lessons. But instead of letting those moments define him, he used them as a springboard to build something very meaningful. Now, through Ambition in Motion, Garrett helps students connect with mentors in authentic, transformative ways. Today, we talked about how to use setbacks to move forward, the power of mentorship, and why taking initiative can be a game changer for your career. I think you'll find Garrett's story to be a reminder that no matter where you start, you can always find a way forward. Now, let's get some ScholarScoop from Garrett. Hey there, Garrett. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today to give out some really awesome ScholarScoop, I'm sure. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Not a problem. I think when I started thinking about people that I would really love to talk to about their life experience that think would be really meaningful for people thinking about college or career or life, you've been at the top of the list. So when you said yes, I really did appreciate it. Because I had the opportunity, it's been like a couple of years ago now, maybe a few years ago, to hear you talk about, your story and what your college experience was like, which wasn't exactly the path that a lot of people might be thinking about college. But I think it's great because we live in a world today where I think there's so many ways to tackle college, and there's so many things that might happen in your life that get you off the path for college for a little bit. But it doesn't mean that you can't get back onto the path. So maybe a good place to start is for you to give us a little bit of your history with life in college. And then I know the big part of this conversation I really want to be about mentors and mentorships. But I think that's a really good place to start. So if you don't mind, would you sort of give us that story?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, from age 15 to age 19, I was a drug dealer. I had moved to a new town. I was the new kid. I wanted to be popular. I wanted to meet girls. I wanted to be invited to parties. And I thought, one way I could go about achieving this was by selling drugs. And so I did. And sure, I made money. It's at the start. I got the things that I thought I wanted to get, but it felt hollow. And, I wasn't, I guess, maybe in high school, particularly ambitious. I had only applied to one university, Indiana University. I was able to get in. And when I was there, I continued selling drugs and all that sort of stuff. And at the end of my freshman year at Indiana, I got arrested. I received 5 felony distribution charges. I was expelled from school and I was facing prison time. I had no idea where I was going to go, what I was going to do. My life hit me like a brick wall. And yeah, fortunately, I had some people who saw something in me that I didn't quite see in myself, and they gave me some opportunities. So shortly after getting in trouble, I was able to get into a program called At the Crossroads. It's based in St. George, Utah. It's for young men and women who are at the crossroads in their life. It's not necessarily a rehab program as much as it's just there for people just trying to figure their life out. And I certainly was at a phase where I was trying to figure my life out. And I had a couple people, like I said, who had saw something in me that I didn't quite see in myself. I also want to be very clear about this. I recognize that I have privilege. As a white man in America, I might not have been so lucky had I been a different race, a different gender, a different age, grown up in a different time period. I want to acknowledge first that I have privilege, and it certainly aided me as I was able to turn my life around and was able to grow and develop. Um, I also want to acknowledge that during this time period, something by getting in trouble really unlocked something for me. Like up until this point, I think I was just going through the phases of maybe what I thought my parents wanted me to do, or what I thought I was supposed to do, or what, like, going through I remember, like, as a freshman, I was saying to myself, well, I'm just going through the phases, like as if there was a preordained path for me. This is what I'm doing. And then that, like, getting in trouble immediately dashed it, which sounded scary at first, but was one of the greatest things that had ever happened to me because it opened up my mind to, you know what? I have nothing to
Mm.
lose. If I go out and start a business, or if I go out and do something that, a lot of people fail at, who cares? I'm already a failure. Like, I've already embarrassed
Right.
my family. I've embarrassed my friends. I've embarrassed all these people in my life. You want to know what? I am at the ultimate bottom. There's nothing that I can lose. And I certainly am grateful for that because ultimately gave me the confidence to try new things. So I moved to St. George, Utah. I'm in at the crossroads about a month and a half after moving to Utah. I fly back to Chicago to let my family know my life's getting on track. On that flight, I'm reading the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and I'm sitting next to a guy. This guy sees me reading this book and he says, "What is a 19-year-old doing reading this 100-year-old book?"
Hmm.
And we struck up a conversation. And by the time the plane lands, he says, "Oh, by the way, I'm the director of ground equipment in SkyWest Airlines. When you come back from Chicago, what would you think about doing an internship with us in our ground equipment department?" Just on the spot makes me an offer. I remember
Hmm.
my first day on the job, HR does this fingerprint scan
Hmm.
and they do the background check. They go up to this guy, Troy, who was my boss, really was my boss's boss. And they go to Troy and they say, "Troy, this guy might go to prison in the next 6 months. What are you thinking?" And
Hmm.
he stuck his neck out for me. He gave me a chance, and I was particularly lucky. I was able to get this opportunity, and it was really, really amazing to see that, to have someone really stick up for me and give me a chance. And
Did you
so,
like when he asked you that? Did you tell him your story? Like, did he know, or when the person went to him and said, "Troy, Troy," was that the first inclination that he had about your past?
first, maybe like at that time, I definitely was insecure about my story. Like,
Right.
uh, to follow Natasha Bedingfield, I was unwritten. Let's put it like that. My story was like,
Right.
I did not know what my story was going to be or how this
Right.
would all manifest. Obviously, now as things have developed for my life and career, it's like, oh, this story follows an arc and it makes a
Right.
lot of sense. But at the time, it was like, cool. Here was this kid who was a drug dealer, got into a lot of trouble, and like, now he's trying to turn his life around, but it's not particularly clear where the story goes or how the story is going to turn around. So I wasn't at that time at an emotional and maybe mature enough state to actually share my story quite
Yep.
directly yet, especially with so many things up in the air. Because at that
Yeah.
time, I mean, I was looking like I was going to prison. I mean, shoot, I was very worried. In fact, every day while I was in Utah, I was doing like 2-a-day workouts, eating protein shakes. I mean, I'm a
Hmm.
relatively big guy now, but at that time I was like 6'3" by like 160 pounds. And I went to like 200 pounds of just like muscle. I was in very good shape because I was
Right.
concerned. I was going to go to prison. I was
Right.
very afraid.
Yeah.
So I took my life and these chances very seriously. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think like the fact that I was reading How to Win Friends and Influence People, the fact that I was doing a lot of side jobs to help pay for different things. I think he knew something was maybe a little bit different about
Hmm.
maybe my story and scenario that
Yeah.
were not necessarily consistent with other 19-year olds that he knew. Um, but yeah, when that came out, he decided to give me this chance, and I was very lucky, very grateful.
Well, it
Um,
makes me, I want to dive into one thing that I'm just curious about. So you
yeah.
mentioned you're in high school and you're selling drugs. And, I mean, in that sphere, you probably are also in some way winning friends and influencing people, right? Like, because, but with that said, were your family members and parents 100% clueless, like that you were doing this at all? Because it seems like you would probably have a lot of money coming in or something. Um,
Yes, I had money coming in, and I think they had a clue. I would say, I don't know, like my parents are really great parents. I think there were just some conversations they didn't want to have, if that makes
right.
sense.
Oh yeah,
And
sometimes
like,
it's like I'm gonna ignore that or I'm gonna pretend like
yeah,
it's
like,
not a
he's
problem.
a kid. When I was a kid, I, made some mistakes. He'll figure it out on his own, just like I figured it out on my own. I think that
Right.
might have been the case. And yeah, I mean, it's certainly there are hard conversations, and sometimes there's not necessarily a really obvious way on how to approach certain scenarios. And so I certainly was not the greatest of children growing up. but I fortunately had parents who loved me and supported me, and they gave me opportunities, and yeah, I'm really grateful for that. But yeah, I
Well,
would
I think
say, yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, like, I think about, we have high school students involved with our one of our programs. And, I think sometimes people do get in trouble or they do things that they're embarrassed about, or maybe it becomes complicated in a way they don't know what to do about it. So they just keep pushing forward. And I just hear more and more people say that there's such a relief that comes with sharing something that talking to somebody about something that you think is just really horrible, because it might be really horrible. But when you share that, it opens the door for you to maybe find solutions. And I think what you said really resonated with what I've heard before also, where the fact that you got caught is oftentimes the moment that you can now unpack all of this, right? And figure it out. But before you get caught, sometimes maybe people just need somebody that they can say, I'm doing something that's really bad. And what should I do about this? Right.
Yeah, and you're also kind of living behind the scenes. Like when I was a drug dealer, I wasn't living my life. Life was living me. I know that's like a
Mm,
weird thing to say, but it was like I was just kind of, I didn't know what my path would be. I just kind of was like, cool, I'm going to work on getting good grades. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get into the Kelly School of Business. I'm just going to do these things, and then I'm going to get a job, and then I'm going to just like figure out all these things. And when I got in trouble, I realized there was no safety net. I needed to grab my life by the horns, and I needed to like go out and make something happen.
right.
And that was a big turning point. So I get this internship in Utah, and the guy Brian who runs the At the Crossroads programs like kind of saw me as his star pupil, and so he
Mhm,
started connecting me with other business owners and leaders in the southern Utah area, kind of to be like, hey, here's one of the guys that we're working with, and here's how we're like positively impacting people. And I was really fortunate to get all these opportunities to meet with all these really great executives and leaders in the southern Utah area. But some of the other people in my program weren't so lucky. Some of them were relapsing. Some of them were stealing. Some of them were making some poor decisions. And so what I started doing was I started taking them to like Goodwill and helping them get suits. I would start making introductions to them to people who like were doing things that they aspired to want to achieve and do professionally. And I loved it. I fell in love with this
mm,
concept of facilitating mentor relationships because I recognize there's only so many people I can interact with in a given day. But if I can make connections between people that lead to really, really meaningful relationships, I can be a conduit for thousands of more relationships that I don't necessarily have the time to be building or growing and developing over time. And so I
mhm,
fell in love with this concept of facilitating mentor relationships, and was doing this under the program, the nonprofit called Building Utah Youth. And court system ended up seeing this work I was doing. They ended up dropping my 5 felonies to a misdemeanor conviction. I ended up getting re-enrolled in Indiana University, got accepted to the Kelly School of Business, and shortly thereafter started Ambition in Motion, initially as a way to help college students reduce additional semesters of college. I had a lot of
mhm,
friends who would take an additional semester or an additional year of college, but not really realize what the financial impact of that decision might be. I mean, this could be like a $50,000 decision they're making by taking an extra
right.
year. And
Yep.
it's just they're like added to the debt pile. And, now a lot of those friends are paying off that debt pile. And it's a tough road to go and to go against. And so I started connecting them with mentors, with professionals who were doing the things that they thought they wanted to do, whether they were an accountant or a marketer or in finance or a lawyer or a surgeon or whomever. I started
Mhm,
connecting people together to help them recognize, is this a path that I want to go down or is this not? And
right.
I was running these on-campus workshops, teaching students how to use LinkedIn, how to get their foot in the door, how to network in a genuine way. And then all of a sudden, one of the young women in these groups came to me and said, "Hey, I'm the director of alumni relations for my sorority. We're tearing down our sorority house. We're building it back up. We want you to run this program, but for all of our sorority sisters and all of our alumni, because this could be a great way to get our alumni back involved, and maybe they'll donate, but also it's a great way for professional development for our students as well." And I said, sure. Well, their national
Mm,
headquarters heard about that and they said, we want you to do this for all of our chapters nationwide. And I'm like, we'll figure it out. And
Right.
so eventually that grew and grew to more and more campuses and honor societies and universities. And yeah, we've been able to work with thousands of people, facilitating mentor relationships. And so it's been really great and really rewarding work to do. Eventually, our work has expanded into executive mastermind groups. So think mentorship, but on the executive level, connecting vice presidents, directors, C-suite level leaders with each other to work through the challenges that they're facing.
So when you're doing that, like what are some of the top challenges that you find people are facing? And then I'm always curious how college students or recent grads can jump in to be a part of helping some of those challenges get resolved. What's bubbling up to the top right now as challenges?
Are you talking about for like the executives in the mastermind group or for
Yeah,
students?
for the executives, because I think sometimes when you know what they're trying to figure out, then you can sort of see where you could try to insert yourself or be helpful with some of that.
Well, we are in a very interesting time right now. This is the economy right now. What's going on in the world is having a major impact on leaders in their organizations.
Hmm.
And one of the biggest things that I'm seeing right now is prioritization.
Hmm.
Because we are seeing a lot of boards and or a lot of CEOs have a little bit of squirrel syndrome right now where they're like, "Ooh, AI, ooh, new technology, ooh, new software, ooh, let's do this." And the people who pay the price for this are their executive team where they're like, "Cool, I want to do this new AI thing, make it happen." They're like, "Great, I already have tasks A, B, C, and D already on my plate. Where do you want me to slot this one in?" Except for they don't
Hmm.
say that. They just says, "You got it, boss. I'm a team player." And then they hold that
Right.
stress on their chest and it's anxiety inducing and they're frustrated and they don't know where to go. And then the CEO's like, "Wait, what happened to all tasks A, B, C, and D that you were working on?" They're like, "I dropped them to work on this AI thing." They're like, "Oh, I meant to like in the next year or two." They're like, "Well, you didn't say that." And
Right.
yeah. And so ultimately, a combination of mixed signals, not clear expectations set, misprioritization, people getting burned out. Ultimately, it's creating this really interesting environment where having community is really, really helpful because,
Hmm.
yeah, as a leader, you get all this stuff just loaded on your shoulders and you're thinking to yourself, how am I going to hold this weight? Having a group of other leaders who are at different companies can be really cathartic and helpful because it's just a lot.
Well, a lot of times people at the top, they don't have necessarily someone that they can talk about what they're feeling or how frustrated they might be or whatever. And so it is good to have a community of people that are not your board of directors or your board chair, your direct reports. It's just more people that you can lay it out there. But I'm thinking also so if we go back to the college student, the young alumni applying for a role, when they're going through the interview process, is that a good time to ask questions about, how does it work for getting mentorship within your company or organization? Or what would it mean for me to have an intern? Or I mean, a mentorship, how would that work for someone when they're just getting started at a company and they really want some intel?
Yeah, I love that question. I would say, yes, you should ask that, but I also think that there are like you're gonna kind of if you ask the question of like, hey, are there mentorship opportunities at your company? Like any recruiter, any hiring manager, anybody at the organization is gonna be like, oh yeah, for sure. We love
Yep.
mentorship. We have a culture of mentorship. And like that is like something that they paint on the walls of a business, but is that something that they actually live and abide by? And so one thing you can do to flip the question is you could say, hey, who are your mentors in the
Mhm.
business? Who mentors you? And
Yeah.
now you put them in a very interesting position because if they do have a culture of mentorship, it'll be easy. Be like, oh yeah, I'm mentored by this person, and this person's my sponsor. Like, great. It's very clear, crystal clear and like obvious. Where if they're like, yeah, I had a mentor when I first came in, but I haven't stayed in touch with that person ever since then. And like, I kind of just go and do my job. That's not a culture of mentorship. Not to say that's
Right.
necessarily a bad thing, but that's not like that's a pretty clear answer that they're not fostering a culture of mentorship. Which, by the way, I think most companies are not necessarily fostering a culture of mentorship. It's kind of like you come in, you do your job, you go home, and there you go.
Right.
So I like flipping it and saying, asking, hey, are there mentorship opportunities? Because they're going to tell you what you want to hear. If you
Yep.
instead said, hey, who are your mentors? Who mentors you in the organization? where do you get your guidance or just ability to work through challenges? I'd love to learn. That answer will be very telling about what the culture of their organization is like.
I think it's also an answer that would resonate well with the person doing the interview generally, because there's a lot of feedback lately with recruiters that students, particularly young alumni coming in, maybe because of COVID or other reasons, they're not quite as comfortable dialoguing or having a conversation. So I think it's a good question to have in your toolbox. When you're having a meeting with someone, how do you initiate a good conversation? And that's certainly a really good suggestion. I think on the flip side, though, and you might have some insight on this too, at NSCS especially, um, we ask on surveys and things, and it's always a number one or a top thing that students say that they want is a mentor. I'd love to have a mentor. I really want a mentor. But then when you offer them the opportunity for mentorship, you don't see them at the same level saying, "Oh, thank you so much for listening to what we want, need, and giving it to us." It's almost like you have to beg them to actually do it. So, you know, what's your take on that? Like, is it the same thing as the company? People really think they want it, or they do want it, but they just don't follow through. Or what's been your experience in that category?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think people go through different, not necessarily phases in life, but they're in different scenarios where having a mentor can be more pressing and sometimes in some scenarios than others. I think what's really most critical is that if we're seeking a mentor or if that we're thinking about mentor relationships, coming at it from a genuine and non-transactional perspective, I think is really
Mhm.
critical. Because I think sometimes students say, "Oh, I want a mentor because I'm looking for an internship." It's like, "Whoa, hold on a second.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mentorship and internship, very different things. They can coincide, but squares and rectangles are not the same thing. And
Yeah.
yeah, let's be very clear about that. And so I like to use the term horizontal mentorship when facilitating mentor relationships. One, because it helps reduce power dynamics in the relationship, but two, it creates a culture of curiosity. So
Mhm.
horizontal mentorship is this concept that even if someone's older or more experienced or has a higher title, they come into the mentor relationship just as open to learning from the other person as the other person is coming in open to learning from them. And if we can come in with that mentality, we are much more likely to have a productive and high quality mentor relationship. Whereas if we give power dynamic and say, "Oh, you're the mentor, you're the mentee," if we create that delineation, what I found is that the relationships do tend to fizzle out a lot faster because there's oftentimes an unmet expectation on both sides between that. So we say, "Oh, you're the mentee." Sometimes mentees might think, "Oh, my mentor is going to get me a job. They're going to get me an internship. They're going to get me
Mhm.
an interview. They're going to get me an introduction." And that's not necessarily what a mentor is. They can lead to those things, but that's not why
Mhm.
you got a mentor. You got a mentor so you can bounce off of ideas and things like that. Vice versa, as a mentor, sometimes the assumption is like, "Oh, I'm going to ramble about war stories, about all the things that I think the student wants to hear, or I'm not going to ask questions and let them be the only one who asks questions because like they should be curious about my life." And
Mhm.
or, "Oh, it's okay if I show up late. I'm the mentor. They're the mentee." Ultimately, what I think is really critical is that if both parties can come in with a mutual respect and a mutual curiosity, they're going to be much more well equipped to handle that mentor relationship over time versus if they're just trying to fulfill whatever preconceived notion they have about what it means to be a mentor or a mentee.
I love that. I've often referred to that concept as reverse mentorship, where I'm going to mentor you, but you probably have just as much that you can offer to me that I can learn about what's happening in your day to day life experience, particularly in the work that I do with college students and whatnot. I'm pretty far removed from college, so oftentimes the students give me the best perspective on what's happening in their life and in the world at the moment. Is that a good question to ask if you're having a conversation with someone about being a mentor, or if you're in that interview scenario, to say, do you feel like you would be open to me actually also in some ways mentoring you? Or does that sound too bold or confusing to someone that doesn't get the big picture?
That's a great question. I mean, that's kind of where we come in as facilitators of a mentor program is to set that expectation from the outset. Because if it
Yeah.
comes from us, then it's very crystal clear. The expectation is set, the table is set, the agendas are like we have laid out the situation for horizontal mentorship to thrive.
Right.
Whereas, yeah, you're coming into a mentorship and it's not clearly or explicitly stated. Um, yeah, that might come across as bold, but it really shouldn't. Like if
Hmm.
any mentor has like any self-awareness to recognize like, of course I can learn from somebody else, that's great. But if we got an ego the size of Texas,
Yeah.
that might be a tough pill to swallow.
But it could also be a deal killer. Maybe if you're looking for someone that has that two-way thing, and the person that you're talking to is like, not really interested in that. Not that someone might say that out up front, but if you don't get a good vibe, you might be like, I don't know if this is the best mentor for me, possibly. I also wonder about, I mean, we work especially with high achievers. They're ambitious and they're always looking for avenues to get ahead. And I feel like LinkedIn has become one of those places where a lot of people have very high expectations for sending blind direct messages to people and asking very bold things of people. Do you do you see this in the work that you do in building these mentor relationships? And like, what advice do you give to people about using online tools for reaching out, and how does that work?
I am a huge fan of LinkedIn, but I can say that LinkedIn has changed over time. When I first started teaching these online workshops and helping students connect, LinkedIn was not necessarily relatively nascent, but not nearly as, I think, well known as it is
Hmm.
today.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I'm a big fan of students reaching out because at the end of the day, what's the worst that could happen? They say no or they don't respond. Okay, whatever, no skin off your back.
Right.
But all
Right.
of a sudden, if it leads to them saying, yeah, I'll have an informational interview with you, I'll take a conversation with you, I'll meet with you for coffee, like who knows where that conversation or relationship can go. And I would say now more than before, you might have to send a handful more messages before you get your first response.
Yep.
Because for better or for worse, people are inundated on LinkedIn and there's just a lot to digest there. So, what I'll say is you might have to send instead of 10 messages, maybe you got to send 20 or 30 to get that
Yep.
first reply back. But ultimately, you got to go with this mentality of what do you got to lose? If it's that important to you, if getting this sort of insight or having this person as a mentor or just a person in your life is important enough for you, put yourself out there. You got nothing to lose.
Yeah, that's really good advice, and I think it's important just to look at, like, things you have to take initiative to get results, and if you take no initiative, you're not ever gonna know if there's a result on the other side of that or not. So, I think that's really good advice. There was a point, and it was probably 15 years ago, that we had a partnership with LinkedIn because they had a really big challenge with college students not using it at all, which maybe gets a little to your point because they felt like they didn't have enough to make a substantial profile. And so they just, that's for professional people that have careers that are already in motion. Um, Now, actually, we're starting to work with high school students and talking to them about how they can start getting active and engaging there. So it's probably just going to become a bigger resource and a bigger opportunity, and it's probably going to keep getting sorted out. But I think all of those tools should be leveraged to the fullest extent because you're right, you just never know. Sometimes the ones that I get that are like, "Could we meet for a coffee?" or "Do you have time that I can pick your brain about something?" Those types of things. I'm much better if people are to send a note and just say, "I have like one question I'd love to just have a quick conversation with you about," or something that doesn't sound like it'd be so time consuming, like a coffee. I'm not sure sometimes, but I think everybody has their creative angle to trying to make that work.
Yeah. And, I would also say as a new parent, for me, getting
Yeah.
coffee is really difficult because someone could be my next door neighbor, but I might as well be living on Mars because leaving my house is not that easy. I work from
Right.
home. So, yeah, I would say like that's, one factor, but doing a Zoom call, very easy, easy to slot
Yeah.
someone in, easy to meet, easy to connect and have that conversation. Happy to. And I think that's something that is, that's really important is for students to realize professionals want to help you grow and succeed. They want to see you thrive.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. The way I like to look at it is, and this is a sports analogy, but one of the ways you can tell a coach is a really good coach, what just regardless of what sport you're looking at, is how often did that person's assistant coaches become head coaches somewhere else?
Hmm.
And I think there's a professional alumni kind of association one can build by mentoring a student who goes off and does amazing things. And
Yeah.
so I like to think, maybe this is my naive approach to it, but I like to think there's a lot of professionals out there that want to build out their metaphorical coaching tree where they help mentor people and they went on to do amazing things in their careers.
No, that's a really good way to frame it up. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but I think maybe that's another thing to kind of look a little more into when you're talking to people about in the dialoguing, who are some people that you've mentored and what are they doing now? Or where's their life at the moment? Because you can learn a lot from that in terms of what they are, how much they're interested in investing in you and being committed to you. Well, I know we don't have a ton of time. Like you mentioned, you have a 5 month old, so I appreciate you spending some time with me. And I think more and more like that. Obviously from the NSCS perspective. First of all, I'm really proud that you're a member of NSCS at Indiana University. So that's really great, and it's also wonderful that a program that you have created has become a part of our opportunities for NSCS members. And I think the intern or the mentorship program, sorry, that you created is something that is such a great benefit that we're continuing to work on getting more and more of our students involved with that. Have you had, what's your general take about looking at all of the different groups that you work with? Um, has it been a good experience with NSCS? I'm just curious from my selfish side of thinking about this a little bit.
Yeah, working with NSCS has been great. I think, yeah, it's a it's a program where we love to continue this effort of connecting college students with mentors, and yeah, we really love it. Actually, I've got a cool story for you, Steve. So I am a part of NSCS, and I remember when I first joined NSCS, there was this like initiation program, and
Mm.
there was a variety of other students at Indiana University. We got together, and we got in these little groups, and we talked about different things we wanted to do professionally in our college career and all that sort of stuff. And that group was such an indelible part of my like college career. Like one of the people in my little groups ended up being my roommate. Another
Oh,
one was really so. The one part of my story that I skipped a little bit was when I first came back to Indiana University. I didn't immediately start Ambition in Motion. The first thing I did was I started a student organization called CLEAR. It stands for College Lifestyles Excluding Alcohol and Recreational Drugs. It was just
oh,
it was a way to have fun, dodgeball, kickball, ice cream
mm,
pool parties, capture the flag, like ultimate frisbee, trivia nights. Like it was just a way
mhm,
to have fun on campus, without drugs or alcohol. Because obviously I was coming back. I'd made obviously a lot of poor choices. And one of the guys who was in the group with me in that NSCS group was on our board for when we first built the student organization. And he ended up helping me with Ambition and Motion as well. And so
oh.
that's a fun story that I don't normally incorporate as part of my story, but as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, that's something that would be fun to incorporate. So NSCS helped foster a lot of relationships that I still have today, and yeah, has
Well, I
has helped with a
appreciate.
lot of different things.
I love hearing that. It's always especially meaningful when I know the various ways that NSCS has positively impacted people. And there's a lot about your story that is so special, and it just is a really good reminder that, poor choices don't have to be the end of the road. And sometimes the poor choices are what open the roadways, right? And create other things. And so I hope everyone listening into this will look at it from the perspective of, everybody's, I used to love the biography channel when that was a thing. And, they had a tagline and it was like, every life tells a story. And I think that's so true. Like everyone's life has a story attached. And the great thing about your story is that it was a little bit of a rough patch, but it has turned into something that's making a tremendous difference for so many people in so many ways. So congratulations on your your turnaround, and then the ways that you're really making a difference. So, and thank you for doing this,
Yeah,
Garrett. I
of course.
really
Okay, I've
appreciate it.
got one last story to
Oh,
share.
sure.
Real quick, I was at a networking event last night, and one of the executives in our executive mastermind group, she's at this event. She's a chief people officer of a medium sized bank here in Texas, and unfortunately, her mother passed away about a year ago, and she's in her late 40s, I'm going to assume,
Mhm.
and one of the aspects of grief that she's going through is this realization that a lot of the things she did professionally of getting up to a C-suite level title within an organization of being, I mean, she was on the panel, she was a speaker at this event that I was at. She's always speaking at different opportunities. She's a very influential person in especially the Austin, Texas business scene. And one of the things that she shared with me last night was like, now that her mother has passed, she's like, I'm starting to recognize, like, why am I doing all these things? I realized like I did all these things because she could never do them. And now she's thinking to herself, what is my next chapter in my life? And so the reason why I tell this story is the sooner you can relinquish whatever perceived shackles or whatever perceived
Mhm.
like life you need to live based on whoever's expectations they are, the sooner you can release them and live your own life, the sooner you can pursue a path where you're feeling satisfied with yourself and you're doing it for you, not for anybody else. And I think that's really, really critical. And it does not matter how old you are. So, like,
Right.
even in her scenario, she's like probably right around 50 years old or something like that. And
Mhm.
yeah, she's doing that for herself, which is amazing.
Yep.
And I hope and I believe she'll probably continue on in her executive path. But even if she doesn't, I'm going to 100% support her because she gets to do whatever she decides she wants to do moving forward. And I think as students, the sooner you can start pursuing whatever path that is that you think is important and impactful to you, the more likely you are to be fulfilled with whatever you do.
Yeah, that's important, and people really should think about it. And I know there's a lot of pressure oftentimes for students who want to satisfy or make their parents proud, and their parents have expectations that they impose upon them. And, I think one of the lessons that I can take away from you is even as your parents might be pressuring you to think about something, even when you're in high school, think about who you could reach out to and the space that you authentically think that you want to be in, right? Talk to people that are doing the things you want to do, and maybe build a little bit of a bench of people who can support you in those types of things. Because it's not easy to tell your parents no. And I've talked to a lot of students in NSCS that are in majors that they don't really want to be in, but it came with the caveat: if we're paying for your school, this is what you're going to do. And so they're trying to find ways to, fulfill the obligation of the tuition, but also pursue the other things that they're interested in, probably until they can find their breakaway point somewhere along the way, I suppose. But I think you're right. Think about your authentic opportunity. This is your life experience. Your parents have had a life experience. They're having their own. You don't need to be hijacking it, or they shouldn't be hijacking yours, right? So it's a
That's
lot in
right.
that. That's a really good lesson, and
Well,
that's where the mentorship really comes into play, I think.
totally. And I can definitively say when I started Ambition and Motion, I started it as technically a sophomore at Indiana University. When I
Yep.
graduated, my parents were very much not for me being an entrepreneur. And they're like, well, you're cut off. Like, good luck, figure it out. So I was a bartender and server on Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday brunch to pay for rent.
Uh-huh.
Um, and now, like, everything's great. Like, they're like, oh,
Right.
our son runs his business. He's got these employees, all these things. It's going amazing, all that sort of stuff. But like, let's just not forget, there were the early days when it wasn't all success and roses and
Mhm.
gumdrops. You got to work through the tough parts. It's so I guess long
I
story short,
think
yeah, if you make your own decisions, you go off on your own. Uh, I'm always an advocate for entrepreneurship, but if you do recognize it can be hard at first,
Mhm.
keep pushing through, keep persevering. Uh, I think as long as you don't let your lifestyle habits and your culture, your creature comforts get in the way of you, living.
Right.
The longer you're in the fight, metaphorically, the more likely you are to start winning.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a little bit of a theme to this with all of the ScholarScoop or a lot of the ScholarScoop conversations I've had so far, where people's paths have maybe not always been embraced by people and their families, but there was this internal thing like, I want to do this and I'm going to be successful at it. And sometimes what you think you're going to be successful at doesn't turn out to be that exactly, but every choice that you made leaves you in a direction, right, to create something that you wouldn't have known otherwise. So I think pursuing what you want to do is probably going to get you to a better place than being resentful or angry or upset about doing something that someone else imposed on you. So I hope that this will encourage a lot of people to think about the mentors in their life who have helped them, uh, and pursue the people that can really help put some of this stuff into perspective and put them on the right path. So, thank you again for everything that you're doing. And I look forward to maybe having this conversation with you again in the future and just continuing to learn more from what you're learning from working with all these great people.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.